Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Conformément à l'article 108.3H de règlement, la motion adoptée.
Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3H, the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, September 17, 2025, and the order of reference of October 28, 2025, the committee is resuming its review of the Conflict of Interest Act.
For today, from Brookfield Corporation, Mr. Justin B. Beber, who is the Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Beber, you have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement, sir. The floor is yours. Go ahead, please.
But just before.
En avant?
Avant, Monsieur Beber.
Okay.
If it's possible.
C'est un appel de règlement?
Is this a point of order? Yes, probably.
Unless you indicate to me what you want the floor for.
It's about a letter that it was put on social media, on X, and it was in English, and we didn't have that letter. Do you have that letter?
What?
Do we have that letter, Nancy?
It's not work of the committee.
I think it's Mr. Barrett and the team.
Ce n'est pas nécessaire pour moi qu'envoyer des messages.
It's not up to me to send private messages to other members of the committee in both official languages. Member, we don't have a copy in French.
That we chose to share. It's not the work of the committee. But if the member opposite, Mr. Chair, would like a copy in French, I'm happy to furnish her with it. But it's certainly not, doesn't speak to the privileges of members of this committee, and I would say it's certainly not.
Can I just have another question? Did you receive an answer to that letter that you were asking?
Madame Lapointe, before we begin. So you raised your hands. I'm going to take this as a point of order, which I expect it is. Mr. Barrett answered the question. Let me say from my standpoint, that letter was not done by the chair on behalf of the committee. It was sent to Mr. Beber and Brookfield on the part of committee members of the Conservative Party. So there was certainly, from my standpoint, no obligation for the letter to be in both official languages. So it wasn't on behalf of the committee, Madame Lapointe. So, yeah.
Did they receive an answer? Did they receive an answer?
I believe that an answer was distributed this morning. Let me just check with the clerk here.
Thank you.
Okay. So as I suspected, the response from Brookfield to the Conservative member's letter was sent to every member's P9 this morning directly from Brookfield. It wasn't sent to the clerk nor through the clerk. It is being, and it was sent in both official languages as well. So I've asked the clerk to send that response to all members of the committee. Okay? Thank you. Mr. Beber, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair and members of the committee, I am pleased to appear before you today in order to assist the committee in whatever extent and to whatever extent I can in your study of the Conflict of Interest Act. My name is Justin Beber, and I serve as Chief Operating Officer and a member of the Executive Committee at Brookfield. Let me begin by repeating Brookfield's respect for this committee and its important work. As an international company with roots in Canada, we recognize the significance of transparent and robust frameworks in maintaining public trust in our institutions. By way of background, Brookfield is one of the largest investors in Canada. We are owners and operators of critical infrastructure and other assets and businesses across the country. We have over 600 direct employees in Canada, and our operating businesses employ more than 15,000 people from coast to coast to coast. In 2024 alone, we, together with our consolidated businesses, remitted over $750 million in federal tax. This does not even include other types of tax paid in Canada, including provincial, municipal, and school taxes where they apply. We have grown to become a global company, but our heritage is in Canada, and we are proud to be invested in so many critical sectors of the Canadian economy. including midstream energy infrastructure, renewable power, financial services, and real estate, to name only a few. When Mark Carney made his decision to run for leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada, even before he became Prime Minister, we sought expert advice to review our policies and procedures to ensure that we remain on the right side of the rules at all times. Mr. Carney departed Brookfield on January 16th of this year, the same day on which he formally announced his candidacy for the party leadership. Since then, at no point has anyone at Brookfield spoken with the Prime Minister about Brookfield business. We understand the increased interest in the management of potential conflicts, and I am pleased to be here to talk about Brookfield's approach to compliance and the priority we place on ensuring integrity across our business. As Chief Operating Officer, I have primary oversight of Brookfield's corporate operations, including legal and compliance activities and human resources, which includes our compensation programs. I am fully prepared to assist in any way that I might help advance the committee's work. In particular, I am happy to discuss the items raised in the correspondence received from certain committee members on Saturday night, including the composition and management of our funds. I'm also happy to discuss our general approach to executive compensation, subject to the restrictions related to personal privacy that I outlined in my response letter. The committee members' letter also expressed interest in lobbying activities that may be conducted by companies we work with. As I noted in my response, as a general matter, Brookfield does not direct or manage government engagement or advocacy efforts by our portfolio companies. However, I am happy to discuss our approach to compliance in this area, which is something we take very seriously. In closing, Brookfield is committed to supporting the committee's important work in a manner that is reflective of our company's role as an international investor and business owner. While our company and personnel are not subject to the Conflict of Interest Act, and we do not administer blind trusts for public office holders or act as trustees for such arrangements, we are prepared to share whatever perspective we can. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Beber. I appreciate you being under time so that we can get to questions. We're going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
At Brookfield, when Brookfield's value increases, the value of stock options and deferred share units also increase. That's how these instruments work, correct?
Yes, when our share price increases, the value of those instruments do increase, yes.
And that basic reality doesn't change simply because those instruments would be placed in a blind trust. The value would still rise when the value of Brookfield rises, correct?
Yes.
So if someone holds Brookfield options and units in a blind trust or not, they personally benefit when Brookfield performs well. Isn't that right?
Anybody who holds those instruments, whether during employment or following employment, derives the benefit from those instruments. That's correct.
And any instrument can be sold, bought back, cash settled, or unwound in an instance where, for example, if Parliament required by law divestment by sale, that possibility exists, correct?
The Prime Minister would have certain instruments as part of our long-term incentive plans. There are certain instruments that are less liquid than others. I'm happy to get into the details of that if you wish.
I would, but the premise is what I need to settle is that they can be sold, bought back, or cash settled or unwound. It is possible, should it be a requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, it's possible.
Thank you. Long dated, they're long dated, so we get that. But that's generally how compensation contracts work. That's not some kind of unique. That's not something unique to Mr. Carney, since you brought him up.
Well, long term, yes. In some cases, exercisable in shorter horizons. In some cases, the ultimate value is received far into the future.
Can you explain briefly how stock options or deferred share units and notional long-term incentive plans work at Brookfield? What drives their value?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I will try to be brief. Helpfully, all disclosure relating to Brookfield stock options and deferred share units is disclosed in detail in our public filings, so it's very much available. In a nutshell, stock options are rights to acquire shares of Brookfield at a certain price, and those exist and during their pendency are exercisable, subject to vesting, because when we award them, people take subject to vesting schedules. So even though you awarded them, they have to vest during the time that you are with Brookfield, and then exercisable for stock that can then be sold into the market. Deferred share units are slightly different. They also track the value of a Brookfield share, but they are not actually shares. And when they mature, they are paid out to the individual based on the value of the share at that time. They are the second component to some of our LTIP programs.
Are you able to give us approximate value range of options and deferred share units that Mr. Carney still holds?
As I said in my response letter, that's personal and private information, and that's not something that Brookfield is permitted to disclose to the committee.
Well, what I will say is that you enjoy parliamentary privilege while you're at this table, and this committee is not constrained in its ability to request information or documents. But I'll move on for the moment.
Okay.
Increases in Brookfield's performance increases the value of the instruments that Mark Carney still holds. So he makes more when Brookfield does better. Yes?
In relation to the stock options and deferred share units, yes, as the value of Brookfield increases, the value of those instruments increase. There are also carried interest entitlements that relate more specifically to funds that we manage.
So speaking of funds, the Global Transition Fund is one that Mr. Carney was directly involved in. Are you able to provide us with details of the investments that are inside it that drive the value of his position or those who hold a position in it?
Yes, so I believe you're referring to Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1, which was launched during the time that the Prime Minister was with Brookfield. And I can confirm that all of the investments made in that fund are contained in the annexure to the Commissioner's screen document that has been published.
Okay. We're going to have to come back to some of this, but my last question is, with the Prime Minister still holding compensation that rises with Brookfield's performance, how would you say that Canadians would be able to have confidence that blind trust and private screen are enough to protect the public interest when, as you agreed, when Brookfield does better, the Prime Minister is going to do better?
And that's a very fair question.
I need a quick response, and if you can you?
Well, I think it's based on whether or not the conflicts can be managed. I'm happy to talk about that further.
Thank you, sir. Madame Lapointe, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît. Monsieur Beber,
Mr. Beber, we have both official languages here at committee.
Thank you. Go ahead. Madame Lapointe.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome, Mr. Beber, to our committee. We're pleased to have you with us today. In your experience, whether it be with Brookfield or elsewhere in the corporate world, have you interacted with the federal system for conflicts of interest or with the Conflict of Interest Act?
Merci pour le question.
Thank you for the question.
Brookfield as a private enterprise is not subject to the Conflict of Interest Act. So we have not had interaction on this particular matter as a result.
Dans vos expériences antérieures?
In your past experience at all?
OK. Merci.
Thank you. Do you believe that Brookfield's financial situation is relevant in our study on the Conflict of Interest Act?
Oui, certainement.
Of course, I can repeat. Do you believe that Brookfield's financial situation is relevant in our study on the Conflict of Interest Act?
Thank you for the question. My view is that since the Conflict of Interest Act really does not apply to private enterprise, and its implementation and adjudication should be the purview of government, the ethics commissioner, and the other government apparatus that exists in order to manage those who enter government and exit government. I would say that private enterprise likely has little to say about those mechanics.
Merci.
Thank you. Throughout our study, witnesses have talked about tax havens, and they said that any country could be accused of being a tax haven, including Canada. In your experience in the business world, is this an accurate description of the environment internationally?
Thank you for that question as well. No, I think that's a gross mischaracterization of our global taxation system. We at Brookfield, like many sophisticated institutional investors, invest all over the world. And we invest in large businesses in their home jurisdictions. When we do that, we are buying businesses with employees, large management teams, and assets on the ground. And those businesses pay tax in their jurisdictions. The caricature of the taxation system as being in tax havens is not apt, because what we are actually trying to do is create tax transparency so that after-tax proceeds from those companies can then be returned to investors with no friction, and then tax paid by those investors in their home jurisdictions. And the tax legislation in Canada recognizes that. It affords institutional investors such as ourselves to utilize those frameworks in order to compete globally and in order to ensure that our investors are receiving the maximum after-tax proceeds that we can generate.
Merci. Encore, depuis le début de cette étude, nous avons...
Throughout the study, we've heard colleagues state that your business would be avoiding paying taxes in Canada. What would you like to respond to Canadians who are listening to us right now who could be concerned by such accusations, given the important activities of Brookfield in Canada?
Thank you. As I said, what I would want everybody to know, and what all of our investors all over the world, our shareholders, our clients, some of the most sophisticated institutional investors in the world know, is that contrary to some of these so-called publications, we pay all taxes that are due and payable in all jurisdictions in which we operate. And as I mentioned before, the structures that we put in place actually facilitate the payment of taxes in the appropriate jurisdictions where they should be paid.
Quelles mesures votre entreprise...
What measures does your business implement in order to pay all of its taxes in Canada?
Well, we have very significant reporting and tracking across all of our businesses. We are meticulous in ensuring that our records are always up to date. We have strong governance principles in place with all of our businesses. As soon as we onboard a new company, they become part of Brookfield, and the reporting lines are implemented immediately. And we, in fact, have people inside of Brookfield, internal auditors, who are also checking the work and ensuring that all of our procedures are operating properly.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Lapointe. Mr. Beber,
Thank you,
make
Ms.
sure you have,
Lapointe.
please, Monsieur Thériault pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît. Commencez.
Mr.
Oh,
Thériault,
Mr.
you have
Thériault.
6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. In an email exchange, Brookfield was asking why it should appear before the committee, given the topic of our study and reviewing the Conflict of Interest Act. I wanted to specify what our mandate is. We need to review whether or not to extend the scope of the legislation. We want to increase transparency, prevent conflicts of interest, avoid potential or apparent conflicts of interest, regulate having assets in a tax haven by public office holders, limit the use of blind trusts. And so as soon as we hear from witnesses who tell us that Brookfield is a champion of tax evasion, and we know that the Prime Minister has interests in Brookfield, you'll understand why your presence here is mandatory.
Réponse courte.
Short answer, please.
The spirit in which
Monsieur le Président, time out. J'apprécierais que M. Beber
I would like for Mr. Beber to keep his earpiece on. Somebody should show him how to wear it, because it'll be complicated if he has to put it down every time and put it back on.
May not look good on TV, but I suggest that maybe you put your earpiece on so that you can hear the entirety of the question and any comments that come your way, rather than, it's just easier that way. I do the same thing sometimes, so.
it was suggested to me that
Yeah,
I might wind up hearing myself in my ear. And it
you
might be-
could, and at that point you can take it off, but just make sure for the entirety of the question that you keep it on
Okay,
for the
thank
comments.
you. I apologize.
Monsieur Thériault, j'ai arrêté le temps, mais
Mr. Thériault, I did stop your time. You asked a question and made a statement to Mr. Beber. Can he respond? Mr. Beber.
comment, and I'll start the clock right now. Thank you.
I was simply going to say that we respect the spirit in which this committee is undertaking its work. First and foremost, the reports that you've heard are completely false. I've tried to explain in response to some of the questions that we've already received that Brookfield pays all taxes that are applicable, and we have demonstrated systems in place and structures in place to do that, and we do want to be helpful in your quest to assess whether or not your current rules apply and apply effectively.
Donc, vous nous dites ici que
So you're saying that Brookfield does not do tax avoidance which is completely legal. That's not something that you do? You don't do any kind of avoidance? Not tax evasion, tax avoidance. So what you're saying today is that Brookfield does not practice any kind of tax avoidance. Yes or no?
We practice tax planning the way any other company practices tax planning.
je comprends que vous ne voulez pas utiliser le
I
terme
understand that you don't want to talk about tax avoidance, which is a technical term, and I understand that you're not the only ones who do tax avoidance. We understand that it is completely legal, but we are looking into this because It's not because something is legal that it is morally acceptable. There's a study by the Canadian Revenue Agency, and you must understand our concern, and it shows that the federal government is missing out on $26 billion in taxes every year. And for the category of tax avoidance, it's about $3 billion per year, which is not insignificant. And so that's why I would like for us to look at the minimum global tax. How much time do I have left, Chair? 1 minute, 40 seconds, Mr. Thériault. What I would like to know is whether or not Brookfield benefits from from Mr. Carney's statement where they do not have to pay the global minimum tax.
No, to the best of my knowledge, we are subject to all those rules in every jurisdiction in which we operate.
Attendez là. À ma connaissance, ça veut dire quoi?
What does that mean to my knowledge? Does that mean that it's possible but you're not aware of it?
It would be unlikely, but I did not.
Peu probable. Ça veut dire
Unlikely? What does that mean?
vous n'êtes pas en mesure de répondre à cette question.
Can you not respond to the question today?
Say that Brookfield complies with all laws across the globe relating to tax.
Monsieur Carney,
Mr. Carney, 6 months before an OECD decision to exclude the United States from the global minimum tax, even though Canada had put that measure in place, but before that, he moved headquarters to New York. 6 months later, he says American businesses are not subject to that global minimum tax. And you're saying that you're not benefiting from that. Is that what you're saying? That you're not benefiting from it?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And we didn't move anything.
Okay.
And I'd love the opportunity
alors
to talk
pourquoi
to
le faire?
No, that's it. Thank you. You may get the opportunity, Mr. Beber. It won't be from me. It may be from some other members of the committee. We're going to conclude the first round. We're going to go to the second round. Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes, 300 seconds. Just also want you to be mindful of the interpreters as well, please. So ask the question, response, ask the question, just to make sure that the interpreters everything's in sync here. So, okay, thank you. Go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Beber. I want to ask you some questions about carried interest payments that you alluded to earlier. Mr. Carney's ethics disclosure indicates that he is entitled to carried interest payments, which are essentially future bonus pay from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1, which he helped set up. Mr. Carney also co-chaired the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 as well as the Catalytic Transition Fund. Is Mr. Carney entitled to carried interest payments in respect of those funds?
No, he's not. And the reason for that is we were in the process of setting up those funds when Mr. Carney decided to leave Brookfield to pursue the Liberal leadership. And we had not yet instituted any allocation of carry from those funds. Those funds had not yet been raised. When we talk about launching a fund, we're starting the marketing of that fund, and they had not yet reached a conclusion, even an initial closing of those funds, and therefore we hadn't allocated any carry. Had he stayed with Brookfield, he certainly would have been entitled to some.
Thank you for that. And of course, he is entitled to carried interest payments in respect of the first fund, Brookfield Transition Fund 1. I just want to confirm that that fund is registered in Bermuda.
Registered in Bermuda? Yes, I believe that one is.
And the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 is also registered in Bermuda?
I don't have that information at hand.
Well, I would note a March 26, 2025 CBC News report that indicates that the Ontario Business Registry indicates that the governing jurisdiction for the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1 and the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 2 is Bermuda. I presume you're not disputing that.
I won't dispute that.
And
And
I would also just ask that the Catalytic Transition Fund you'll confirm is registered in the Cayman Islands.
I can take that away and make sure that I'm not misspeaking on which jurisdiction it's part of.
I think you know the answer to that. It's yes. So I want to ask you a little bit about the schedule of payments with respect to carried interest from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1. When does the fund mature?
Transition Fund 1 would have a maturity of 10 years plus a 2-year possible extension, which would take it to 2032 to 34, I believe.
2032 or 2034. So it would be at that time that the carried interest payments would be paid out.
Towards that. And I would say that regardless of where the fund is actually established, everything that I mentioned in relation to Madame Lapointe's question hold for everything in that fund.
Now, just in terms of what is in that fund,
Yes.
there are new investments in that fund, correct?
There are investments in that fund. They're not necessarily new.
But if there were new investments in that fund, that would increase the value of carried interest payments, would that potentially?
If additional capital were invested in that fund, it could, if they're good investments.
Okay. Now, Brookfield CEO Bruce Flatt was quoted in a National Post article dated March 15th, 2025, in which he described carried interest payments in the following way, quote, "Put simply, carried interest is our share of the profits realized on an entire fund subject to that fund exceeding a minimum target return for clients. If we meet fund expectations, we get 20% of the profits," close quote. So you would agree that that's an accurate characterization of how carried interest in respect to the fund works.
I think that's a fair summary. Subject to that, the subject to is a very significant part of how carried interest works.
Right. So Brookfield ideally would get 20% of the profits if the threshold had been met or exceeded. Now, in terms of carried interest payments to the managing partners, what is the range? What is the percent of that 20%?
Well, it completely ranges by fund. And
I'm asking with respect to the Brookfield Transition Fund 1.
Need a quick response, Mr. Beber, please.
It's a proportion of the total that Brookfield is
I'm
entitled
asking
to.
what is that portion?
Okay. May have to come back to that, Mr. Cooper. Okay, thank you. Ms. Church, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Beber. Mr. Beber, just picking up on a few points that were raised by my colleagues across the table. You were kind of cut off in your answer talking about the move of Brookfield Asset Management. Can you elaborate on what you were going to say in terms of the actual implications of that transfer of structure?
Yes, thank you. So I was in the process of explaining that nothing, in fact, moved in relation to the designation of New York as our principal office for purposes of the asset management business. That asset management business was launched close to 30 years ago, and we grew it within Brookfield Corporation for close to 25 years. As that, we launched it in Canada, but it, as I think the committee is well aware, has become a global alternative asset manager. The scale of that has been driven in large part by the clients that we have and the jurisdictions in which we've had those opportunities. The United States, being one of the principal capitals of the world in investment flows, drew a lot of our business into the U.S. organically as the business evolved. When we decided to launch Brookfield Asset Management as its own separate publicly traded company, at the same time, the S&P, which regulates what companies are in or out of various indices, changed its rules and made it easier for Canadian companies like us to possibly qualify for inclusion in U.S. indices. And we were already in possession of a company. We were already a company at Brookfield Asset Management with significant girth and presence in the United States. And we designated our New York office, which already existed, as that principal office, which is perhaps is something we should have done beforehand, but certainly the change in rules made that beneficial to us. Nothing moved. We changed the designation of our principal office. No people moved, no assets moved, no investments changed.
Thank you for that. And let me maybe just ask you, because that's a great way to segue into, just talk to me a little bit about Brookfield's headquarters. You're headquartered in Canada. You're headquartered in Toronto, correct?
Brookfield Corporation is, yes.
Yes. You're one of Canada's largest employers?
We are.
Companies?
We are.
How many employees do you have as a company?
Across Brookfield and our portfolio companies, over 15,000.
He said that at the beginning.
And how much federal tax do you pay in Canada? You mentioned it in your open remarks.
$750 million last year.
So would you say that you are proudly Canadian?
We are proudly Canadian.
Point of order, repetition.
Let me ask you
Asked
about
and
another
answered.
topic that my colleagues opposite have raised around conflicts of interest. Presumably you have to deal with conflicts of interest in a corporate context.
Sometimes.
What are some of the tools that you use to manage conflicts inside Brookfield?
I appreciate that question. Conflicts do arise from time to time. And our view is that there are certain principles that must be applied when they do arise. And the first is transparency. We have systems in place to ensure that when conflicts arise, they're identified. Once a conflict is identified, there are really only two ways to resolve a conflict. One is to avoid it altogether, to terminate it in some fashion, and the other is to have it consented to or approved by an unconflicted decision maker. And we have significant processes and procedures in place to ensure that once they're identified, they are resolved through one of those two means.
Do you use blind trust, or are you familiar with the blind trust in the sense that we would use it here in the federal context?
I'm now, after having been invited here, I am loosely familiar with those.
So you would appreciate in the federal context that a public office holder who comes under the Act, when they establish a blind trust, they are considered to have divested their controlled assets?
Yes.
So they're not allowed to give direction to a trustee on that front. So
Right.
No knowledge if the assets are held, if they're sold, if they're converted. So, I mean, my colleague, Mr. Barrett, earlier suggested that if shares are held, that the holder benefits. But there's a big assumption built into that once the assets are in the trust, the public office holder has no knowledge what those assets are. Would you agree with that?
You're over time. I need a quick response, please.
I would. I apologize. I'm not sure what.
Maybe we can come back to it then, because we're 25 seconds over.
Sorry.
Monsieur Thériault, je vais donner 5 minutes. Commencez.
You have 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Beber, tax avoidance is common practice.
Fiscal, c'est une pratique.
Tax avoidance is a common practice.
Brookfield, and there is no tax avoidance at Brookfield.
Vous connaissez l'OCDE?
You know
Si
the
vous connaissez
OECD.
l'OCDE,
If you know the OECD, and the OECD, in order to counter tax avoidance globally, and they decide at the G20 to implement a policy for businesses to pay a global minimum tax of 15% in order to avoid tax avoidance, which allows them to not pay their fair share? Well, it's because tax avoidance exists. If you're being transparent today, you can't say that you're only responding for Brookfield. The OECD decided to implement a minimum global tax, and you can't say that it's not only for Brookfield. That is a question for you.
I'm not an expert in tax policy. I'm aware of the global minimum tax.
Excusez-moi,
I'm going to cut you off. I'm quite surprised. Brookfield insisted on sending you today because they said that you were an expert and that you would be able to respond to all of our questions. You don't need to be an expert to understand the OECD and what they're trying to do, what they're trying to resolve as a global issue. I have a lot of reservations regarding how you're testifying today. I believe that you are avoiding to respond to questions. So I talked about tax avoidance, and now you're avoiding the questions. I'm quite disappointed. I was expecting more. How much time do I have left, Chair? 1 minute, 30 seconds. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. You've said, without a shadow of a doubt, that the measure taken by the OECD and that your change of designation to the United States has not brought any advantages to you and did not allow you to be excluded from the global minimum tax. So you're saying that Brookfield is paying its global minimum tax of 15%.
Paying all applicable taxes in every jurisdiction, including any jurisdictions that were required to implement a global minimum tax. And Mr. Theriault, I will say as well that the reason why the change had no impact on Brookfield is because Brookfield Asset Management Limited, both before and after the designation, remained a British Columbia company and therefore taxpayer in Canada.
Non, je répète ma question.
I'm going to repeat my question because you're not answering it. Does Brookfield pay its global minimum tax of 15%?
On paye tous nos impôts.
You're saying that you pay all of your taxes. I'm asking you the question, are you paying the global minimum tax of 15%?
Every jurisdiction where it applies.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Theriault.
Thank you, Mr. Theriault. Mr. Gould, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Beber. Brookfield has investment projects throughout the world. Do you have any activities in rare minerals like lithium?
We do not have direct investments in lithium, to my knowledge, no.
Est-ce que vous avez des projets d'investissement dans des
Do you have investment projects in housing?
Yes, we do.
Est-ce que vous avez des projets d'investissement?
How about for trains, like the high-speed rail? Is that something that could be interesting to Brookfield in Canada?
We don't necessarily target rail, passenger rail, but we do have cargo rail.
Est-ce que vous avez des intérêts, des investissements dans les
Do you have any investments in clean energy?
Est-ce que vous avez des projets, des investissements?
And how about nuclear projects?
We do, through our investment in Westinghouse.
Est-ce que vous avez aussi des projets dans...
And what about data storage?
We do.
Est-ce que vous avez des projets...
AI?
Il y a beaucoup de ces projets-là qui sont...
A lot of those projects can also be found in the federal budget. For some of those, would they require permits environmental agreements. Some of those require negotiations with Indigenous communities, and it would help Brookfield if the government could offer assistance for those projects, correct?
Would have to apply for whatever permits are required, and we don't expect to be treated any differently than any other business in doing that. And we do it through our portfolio companies, which I'm happy to explain.
Est-ce que ça serait raisonnable de penser
Would it be reasonable to believe, given that the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, left Brookfield on January 16th, and you said it in your opening remarks, that he would have been aware of potential investments for Brookfield for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, our investments tend to be very chunky investments in large-scale companies. So our pipeline of opportunities tends to shift over time, and the pipeline of opportunities 1 month may be very different to another month. So he wouldn't know what.
Ma question est simple. Est-ce que
My question is a simple one. When Mark Carney left on January 16th to become leader of the Liberal Party and then Prime Minister, was he aware of Brookfield's orientation in his role as VP? He must have been aware of something.
I thought you were asking about specific investment opportunities. He was certainly aware of the strategies that we were pursuing in our funds. We're actually very public about it. Anybody who reads our disclosure would understand what our strategy is.
que le budget fédéral présentement peut
Could the federal budget assist you in solidifying certain contracts, given that the federal government will be facilitating certain projects?
I'm not close to every single portfolio company we have. We have over 2,000 businesses that we own as part of all of our funds and our investment strategies. What I can say is that Brookfield, like any other business, and our portfolio companies, like any other business, will assess policy. They're informed of policy at the same time as everybody else, and will react in the manner that is in their best interests.
donc tout ce que
So what I listed out to you in Brookfield's investments, that, and they can be found in the federal budget, is that a coincidence, or was it implemented because that's what needs to be done?
I can't speak to what the Prime Minister has in mind. We don't speak with the Prime Minister about policy or any other matters that would impact Brookfield's business. But in reviewing the policies that the Prime Minister has espoused, I would say they're good for a host of different industries,
Okay.
and how it plays out for any particular company is very uncertain.
Thank you, Mr. Beber. Merci, Mr. Gourde. Mr. Saini, 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Beber, for coming. We had expert in the past from tax point of view. Tax avoidance is not illegal in Canada. Any company to do business in any country wanted to make sure it's a profitable business where they invest. Whether it's Cayman Island, whether it's Bermuda, or whether it's Canada, our tax are so very good. There are a lot of companies who are investing in Canada today because we need them. We need businesses to grow. We need economy to grow. Is there anything wrong? What my opponent's been asking for all these times.
Is there anything wrong? I would say that no, tax policy is engineered to ensure that Canada remains competitive, and every country certainly in developed economies, has the same objective. And it's a competitive world. And we have to be able to compete on a level playing field with other companies. But we do it in accordance and applying all rules and complying with those rules.
Has Brookfield ever been charged criminally or under tax laws for being a bad corporation?
No.
So as long as you are doing business in Canada or across the world in a fair way, I don't understand what my colleagues on the other side are having difficulty with that.
And I would agree. There are rules in place that govern all companies in terms of the way they invest internationally, and those rules are there to facilitate economic productivity while also ensuring that all corporate players pay their fair share of taxes. And there should be nothing wrong with that, and that is how Brookfield conducts its business.
Thank you. Conflict of interest. We deal with screens, we deal with blind trust. As a chief operating officer of a big corporation, in a private sector, do you have such things in place?
As I mentioned before, we address conflicts of interest through the same types of systems that I see being implemented with respect to the blind trust. They're not the same. I don't want to give the committee an indication that they're the same. But they underlying them are the same principles. That one needs transparency to ensure that the conflicts that exist are identified and that they are then addressed appropriately, whether it's through a blind trust, a screen, or any other mechanism.
If we wanted to change tax laws, that is up to the Parliament of Canada. It's not up to the conflict of interest to change those laws. And the Parliament, when they saw fit, they will make sure those changes are made. So for people to accuse, oh, well, we are trying to, that's the duty of the Parliament of Canada and the Income Tax Act. Could I have your comment on that, please?
Yes, I fully agree. I think we're conflating two very different matters, topics, between a piece of legislation that is designed to manage and oversee the behavior of personnel who enter government and how anything that they bring to their office from their history is addressed versus tax policy, which is a completely separate topic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sene. Mr. Beber, we're going to go next to Mr. Barrett for 5, suivi par Mr. Sarré.
Followed by Mr. Sarré, and that will conclude the first hour.
Just to follow up on a few points, has Brookfield Global ever been criminally charged with anything like bribery, for example?
Yeah, here we go.
Charged? No.
Has there ever been an investigation for bribery against Brookfield Global Asset Management?
Nothing that has not been found to be completely false.
But were there charges?
There were no charges.
There was no investigation into bribery in Brazil?
There was, again, that was found to be completely false. And in fact, the person who was alleging is now in jail.
Okay. Is Brookfield registering investment funds to a bike shop in Bermuda good for Canada, and what impact does that have on the payment of taxes in Canada?
Look, as I've said before, first and foremost, we have businesses that do have presence in Bermuda, and those are part of an overall investment structure that allows investors to pool their capital in jurisdictions where we can achieve tax transparency so that businesses that we own can pay taxes in the jurisdictions in which those businesses operate, and then those after-tax proceeds can be delivered to investors in the jurisdictions where they are based and pay taxes there as well.
Your answer is that it's good for Canada to register funds to a bike shop in Bermuda.
I'm not passing judgment on what's good or not.
Okay.
I'm saying what these rules are implemented to achieve.
Are you able to provide us with a list of investments in the catalytic funds and the global transition funds 1 and 2? Is that something you're able to furnish the committee with?
The committee has the list of the investments in Global Transition 1. Global Transition 2 and catalytic are irrelevant.
Huh? Are you able to
implemented to achieve?
Are you able to provide us with a list of investments in the catalytic funds and the global transition funds 1 and 2? Is that something you're able to furnish the committee with?
The committee has the list of the investments in Global Transition 1. Global Transition 2 and catalytic are irrelevant.
Are you able to provide us with a list of the investments in the 3 funds that I've mentioned?
I'd have to go back and check.
Check if you have them, or check if you'll do it?
I'll take it under advisement.
Well, I'd like the list. I'd like the list of the investments in the funds. How was the long-term performance pay structured when Mr. Carney was at Brookfield? Are you able to tell us what metrics determined that pay?
While he was an employee of Brookfield?
Yep.
Like every executive, Mr. Carney was entitled to a compensation package that was comprised of several components. He would have been entitled to a base salary, a short-term annual bonus that's generally expressed as a percentage of that salary, and then the long-term incentive plans that align all of our executives with our shareholders and our clients in both the funds and in the overall performance of Brookfield.
When Mr. Carney left Brookfield, did he retain his unvested interests on standard terms, or were any of his arrangements modified because he was entering public life?
He left on standard terms. He terminated his employment on January 16th.
Standard
he took
terms.
everything that was vested and departed.
Can you tell us what role Mr. Carney personally played in Brookfield securing financing from the Central Bank for the People's Republic of China?
I think you're referring to clients who have invested in our transition strategy, and that would have been the same as all of the senior people senior executives associated with the transition fund.
In the past few months, have there been any decisions of the federal government, tax credits, policy measures that have increased the value of Brookfield businesses in which the Prime Minister still holds an interest? And if you have more than one example, just one example is fine.
I can't think of any.
So in November, Brookfield announced $100 billion in AI infrastructure expansion, $650 million in renewable power, and major U.S. nuclear activity through Westinghouse. Would you agree that government policy in these areas could increase the value of the Prime Minister's Brookfield-linked compensation?
That's a very tangential line to draw. It will all depend on whether this is good for nuclear. We believe is an incredibly important component.
Yeah,
to
I support
any
nuclear energy. I'm just wondering if
Okay.
it'll improve the Prime Minister's financial position personally.
There is no way to tell whether it will or will not.
Thank you. Mr. Sari, 5 minutes.
Mr. Sari, you have 5 minutes.
I don't believe he knows. He knows.
Québécois MP, I prefer to speak in French. If you can put your hand, it will be like. Thank you so much. Alors, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Beber, for being with us today. And thank you for answering our questions. My goal in this committee, and for those who are listening to us, for Canadians who are listening to us, I want us to simplify our discussions as much as possible. And I think that you have a lot of experience, whether it be for governance or managing a business. And it would be good for those listening to us to understand our transparency. Given your experience, have you ever had to deal with such a situation, managing legislation or public regimes, whether it be to understand requirements of legislation or to ensure that your practices follow the rules?
If I understand the question correctly, I don't have any personal experience, and no one at Brookfield has any personal experience with formation of legislation, evaluation of legislation, whether legislation is suitable or the creation of legislation. What we do at Brookfield is take that legislation and determine what procedures and steps are needed in order to comply with it. Is that a fair answer to your question?
Exactly. Yeah. Moi, ça m'intéresse bien évidemment.
I'm interested in Brookfield, and because you're here, I would like for us to benefit from your experience as a witness. You understand governance in general, and if I were a Canadian asking a question, and when a public office holder puts his assets into a blind trust, he does not have access to the information, cannot influence the management of it, the trust. Do you believe that it is a tool that is effective and that can reach the goals that were sought in order to ensure that there is no interference regarding one's assets?
Look, it's very hard for me to opine on matters that involve legislation and government apparatus that I'm not very familiar with. From my review of some of the committee's materials, Mr. Chair, I'm generally aware of the framework that has been put in place and that is being administered for the Prime Minister. What I've tried to say is that the blind trust is a component of that. I understand it, and it's really the components in total that will dictate whether or not this committee determines that the apparatus that has been put in place will be effective or not. It includes the screening. It includes who's making the decisions in order to ensure that decisions are being made on an unconflicted basis.
Merci. Toujours dans le même domaine.
Still talking about the private sector now. And in order to assist us in writing our report, and in order to assist Canadians who are tuning in, there are mechanisms throughout the world in order to prevent conflicts of interest, whether it be real or the appearance of a conflict of interest. In your experience, the measures that we have now, and having blind trusts, and having these ethics screen, and so where a leader is completely separate from his assets, are these deemed credible and efficient and sufficient, or do you have anything that you would propose that we look into?
I think the structure that has been put in place can function appropriately, and it's one that the private sector does not traditionally use. But again, and I apologize for repeating myself, but what will ultimately determine whether a system, a process and procedures to resolve conflicts is successful is whether or not it provides for that transparency and a procedure to adjudicate the conflicts, whether removing them or seeking appropriate approvals for them.
Thank you, Mr. Beber. We're way over time on that one. Mr. Beber, that concludes our first hour and round. I'm going to invite you, if you need a break, we can do that now. I can suspend the meeting for a couple of minutes if you need a break. You're good to go? Okay, so we're going to continue our second hour with Mr. Cooper for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Beber, I want to follow up on carried interest payments. I asked you about the proportion that those entitled to them would receive. You said there would be a range. I presume that the payment would be consistent with industry standards. Would that be fair? It would be in line with industry standards?
Yes, that's fair.
And I would note that a managing partner would generally be entitled, as I understand it, to about 3%. That is the industry standard, and I would note that the Brookfield Transition Fund 1 is a $15 billion fund. If Brookfield gets 20% of the profits, then 3% of that 20%, which is what could apply or would be in line with what Mr. Carney would stand to gain. He would stand to make tens of millions of dollars in future bonus pay from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1. Now,
I don't think that that's the right, you're not using the right math, because what is industry standard would be very much based on how large the fund is.
Are you disputing that Mr. Carney stands to make millions, if not tens of millions of dollars?
Look, our investments may be very, very, very successful.
Yeah, so you're not
so
disputing that.
I'm not saying one way or the other.
You're not disputing that. Now,
certainly not a fact.
Thank you. So with respect to SEC filings, there are 141 investors in the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. You indicated that this committee has...
Sorry, where do you get that information from?
SEC filings.
Okay.
And you, so that is the number that I have. If that number is not accurate, you can state the correct number.
I don't have that detailed information at hand.
But you indicated that, you seem to have some detailed information because you told the committee moments ago that we have a list of all of the LPs, a list of all the investors.
Because I reviewed the annexure to the document that the Ethics Commissioner released publicly.
Well, what we have in the annexure is the reference to Mr. Carney's interest in that fund,
Yes.
reference to the fact that he is entitled to carried interest payments.
Yes.
What we don't have is a breakdown of what the LPs are in the fund. We don't have that.
The identity of the LPs?
We don't have that.
Okay.
So would you undertake to provide this committee with an identity of the LPs?
We don't disclose the identity of the LPs in every single fund that we have. So I don't think that there's any reason to do so here.
Well, I think there is a reason to do so here, insofar as Mr. Carney stands to make millions, if not tens of millions of dollars from future bonus pay based upon the performance of that fund. Mr. Carney knows which public policy decisions might impact upon the fund's success, which in turn impacts his future bonus pay. These represent conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. And at the present time, they're hidden conflicts of interest because Mr. Carney hasn't revealed what those holdings are, even though he helped set up the fund.
I misunderstood your question. You're asking me, what has the fund invested in?
I want to know what has the fund invested in, what the LPs are, what the holdings are. I want to know what's in the fund.
Okay, we're just confusing terminology. What I've told you is that in the annexure, the fund's holdings, each of the companies that BGTF1 holds is in the annexure.
Yeah, it's not.
Each company. And there's only one, by the way, that is in Canada. It's a company called Entropy. Entropy is held by BGTF1.
The holdings in the fund are not in the annex. So I'm just asking you to provide us a list of those holdings.
Sorry, let me be more clear. BGTF1 has invested in 20 businesses, roughly. And each of those businesses, their names, are listed in the annexure.
Who are the LPs?
Again, we don't disclose the identity of our LPs. And the identity of the LPs has nothing to do with the value that the fund will undertake. We manage the fund. We make the investment decisions, and those investment decisions have been made. We own those companies in that fund. If those companies do well, and we do well in stewarding them and driving value through them, then BGTF1 will do well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Beber, the requests that are coming from some members of the committee are being documented by the clerk, and they will be forwarded to you as a request. We're keeping track. Thank you. On va commencer pour 6 minutes avec Madame.
6 minutes for Ms. Lapointe, who will be sharing her time with Mr. Saini. Ms. Lapointe? Yes, I will be sharing my time with Mr. Saini. Earlier, you mentioned that the current context for businesses is very competitive. Some witnesses have said that there are countries that try to offer a better tax situation in order to stimulate economic growth. Governments need to find a balance between fairness and the economy. Do you agree with this description of global economic competitiveness?
I fully agree that the global investment environment is excessively competitive. We work hard every single day to identify investment opportunities that we bring to our clients. And yes, we're aware that countries as well compete for those investment dollars and undertake strategies and policies to attract capital in very legitimate ways in order to ensure that they are attractive places in which to deploy capital. And we, as well as all of our peers and other international investors, pay close attention to those policies, particularly when they align with our sectors of focus.
Merci. Comment vous évaluez la position du Canada dans cette compétition?
Is Canada looking more towards one side than the other? How do you see Canada's position?
Look, I think Canada is a very attractive place to invest. There's always, more ways in which Canada can ensure that it is competitive. And we ourselves are big investors in Canada, as I've said. I think, the current government has made it very clear that they're very focused on that.
Je vais juste continuer un petit peu quand...
Earlier, and you talked about limited partnerships earlier, LPs. What does that mean exactly?
LPs is typically the term used for investors that we bring into the fund. They're our clients. We call them LPs, which is short for limited partners, because most of the pooled capital vehicles that we create are limited partnerships. It's just a standard aggregating vehicle for bringing those investors in. But one shouldn't confuse LPs for the assets that we hold in the fund.
C'est la parole à mon collègue, Monsieur.
I will
you
now
for the-
be giving the floor to my colleague, Mr. Saini.
Thank you. In this discussion, the whole thing seems to be around Mr. Carney, his benefit. If anybody was holding that position, whether it was me, yourself, Mr. Cooper, they would have still the same exact benefit as Mr. Carney had. Or was Mr. Carney exceptionally different from the rest of your people who hold those positions?
No, as I mentioned before, Mr. Carney, when first was compensated like any senior executive of his occupying his role, and his departure was completely ordinary course. We were obviously keenly aware of why he was departing, and we took legal advice in relation to what we needed to do. But as far as his compensation was concerned, he left with what any other employee of Brookfield would leave with. He left with his vested long-term incentive plan instruments. Nothing more.
Thank you. I think as a Canadian, I am very proud that we have a leader who has the vision and a thinking 10 years ahead of time so our country could be back on our footing as a strong, comparative nation doing business in the country.
Make it stop.
I find question
please.
on the opposite side to be that Mr. Carney is some kind of a guy who's a crook, nothing more than that, and I find it very disturbing. And I'd like to hear your viewpoint on that.
Well, I had the opportunity to work with Mr. Carney over 5 years, and I found him to be an exceptionally talented executive and a person of great integrity. And I know that there's been a lot of work that has been implemented to the ethics screen that was put in place. And I know that he would want it to work.
We had people from the Prime Minister's office, from Privy Council. We have commissioner from the ethic, and our standards when it dealing with blind trust and conflict are the gold standard in the world, are the top notch. And do you have any suggestion if we can improve them any better?
Very quick response. We're over.
I think that the mechanism in place makes a lot of sense, and I don't have any additional recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Beber. Mr. Thériault pour 6 minutes.
Monsieur Thériault.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. According to Mr. Cloutier and Ms. Alpin and Ms. Desplantes, and these are investigative journalists, at the end of October, or rather, Brookfield Asset Management, under Mr. Carney, on March 29th, this article was published. Up until January, Brookfield had not paid taxes for over 3 years, according to its financial statements. Ms. Alpin, who is a tax expert from the Université de Québec en Outaouais, found that data in a document sent to the United States, and under Mr. Carney, Brookfield did not pay any taxes between 2022-2024, while declaring $1 billion in benefits, or profits rather. She goes on to say that taxes are paid elsewhere, but given the complex structure and having activities in many countries, makes an analysis very difficult. She believes that Brookfield seems to be very present in tax havens such as Bermuda, Barbados, the Cayman Islands. 14 businesses linked to Brookfield are in the Pandora Papers. Are these people wrong? How do you explain that? And this is the American Commission on Stock Exchange.
I don't have the report that you're referring to. There are many reasons why there may be misunderstandings relating to the types of disclosure that you're referring to. In fact, we've had many publications, not many, but some, which have completely misconstrued the reporting that we have done. One of the main misunderstandings that those who perhaps are not as well informed in terms of how the tax rules work is that we aggregate under international financial reporting standards, we aggregate all income from across every business that we own and control. We aggregate all of that income. And yet, when we report our taxes, we only report the taxes that are proportionate to us. And therefore, there is a significant amount of tax that is being paid by our partners, others who own investments in these very same businesses that don't get reflected in our statements. And that tends to be a big misunderstanding as to our own reporting. We, as I tried to explain, our businesses pay significant tax in all the jurisdictions in which they operate. We may not be picking up in our own reporting every single dollar of tax that's paid because we don't own those businesses entirely.
Brookfield de 2022 à 2024.
So from 2022 to 2024, Brookfield paid taxes. What is the amount?
I told you that in Canada alone, we paid $750 million in tax in 2024, 1 year.
Could you send us in a written response regarding 2022 to 2024, regarding the report that was made that I referenced? Can you share that with the committee, please?
I'll have to take that under advisement.
Loi sur les conflits d'intérêts.
Section 20 states that controlled goods are any goods with a value that can be influenced directly or indirectly by the decisions of government policies. And there's a list of the different governments, the different stock options. Mr. Carney has a direct financial interest with Brookfield, and this puts him in a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest because the stock options are deferred. So, with Brookfield Group Corporation and Brookfield Asset Management, he has deferred stock options. And certain newspapers, including the National Post, have stated that the value is of a few $1 billion, and we have learned that these stock options are deferred and that they expire in 2033, 2034. And so, this is a situation where if Brookfield makes money, Mr. Carney might not know by how much his blind trust is increasing, but he knows that his fortune is increasing, and he did not divest because in 2033-34 he probably won't be prime minister, but his fortune will have increased significantly thanks to the economic changes he's bringing in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Thériault. Mr. Gould, you have 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Beber, where does the vision from the Prime Minister come from after 5 years at Brookfield? Working for Brookfield, could that have had an impact on his way of thinking, seeing the future, and have an impact on his job as Prime Minister?
Mr. Carney came to Brookfield after a career at Goldman Sachs, after having been appointed Governor of the Bank of Canada by Prime Minister Harper, Governor of the Bank of England by Prime Minister Cameron. I think when he...
On va arrêter là parce que l'histoire, on la connaît tous.
I'll stop you there because we know the story. This is an ethical situation here that we're dealing with. Are there a lot of co-chairs that have become Prime Minister after the day after stepping down?
Not at Brookfield, no.
Habituellement,
Generally, a Prime Minister, when they leave political life, well, that's the kind of job that might be offered to a Prime Minister. Here we're dealing with the opposite. He had a flourishing career in investment funds. He decides to leave that very lucrative job in order to become Prime Minister of Canada. It's well paid, about $420,000 a year, but I'm sure he earned much more with the investment fund. That said, there are deferred options later. There are issues with our ethics legislation because this situation is unethical. That a Prime Minister is likely to receive a fortune, millions of dollars, from a fund after being a Prime Minister 2 years, for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We don't know for how long he'll be Prime Minister. But what we do know is that he can have an influence on investments and could be having private-public partnerships with businesses that are funded by Brookfield and that indirectly will build capital for him in the future. Are you comfortable with such a situation, given that Brookfield is a fund that is well respected throughout the world, but you might be creating a situation that you might not be proud of ethically?
I don't think it's appropriate for a private enterprise to opine to government as to how the government should be regulating this matter. What I can tell you is that we at Brookfield are very comfortable that the rules that apply to us, which cover lobbying and our interactions with government and public office holders, is clear, and we are highly capable of ensuring that we comply with them.
c'est inédit parce qu'il n'y a pas de règles.
There are no rules. You can say that you respect the rules, but there aren't any. This is the first time that we're seeing a Prime Minister having capital in investment funds that could be further funded by government initiatives. It's not your fault, Mr. Beber. It's just a situation that we haven't seen before. I think it's never been seen before, even globally, and now it's happening here in Canada. The Prime Minister can have an influence on Canadian politics. He will be negotiating with First Nations. Canadians will be paying in order to help businesses with oil and gas, minerals, other areas. It's Canadians who are going to be paying for it, and it's Brookfield and its businesses that will be reaping the benefits from that. So benefits to Canada increases profits for Brookfield, and that's never before seen. Are you still comfortable with that?
Response that always seems to get to you with a very quick response, Mr. Beber, but I need a quick one.
We're able to comply with the laws that apply to Brookfield. We do that every single day, and we expect all of our companies to do the same.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Church, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Beber. You've been, I think, a very patient participant in this late season fishing expedition. I want to give you an opportunity to answer the question about how Brookfield is managing its interaction with the Prime Minister and with government. You touched on this earlier, but maybe you could expand a little bit in terms of how the company as a whole is actually treating this relationship.
Thank you for the question. So as I mentioned, that when the Prime Minister decided to terminate his employment with Brookfield, we sought expert advice in terms of ensuring that the rules and regulations that apply to Brookfield as a private enterprise continue to be robust and appropriate to our organization. We have, I'd say, compliance comes from strong culture and tone at the top. And we have, whether it's anti-bribery and corruption, health and safety, whatever the requirements, we have strong policies and procedures that we put in place in order to manage the application of those regulations across our business. We do that through training of our employees across all of our 2,500 employees, and that training occurs annually. And then at the end of every year, at least annually, we seek certification from employees that they have complied with those programs. On top of that, we then, and I mentioned it earlier, have a team of internal auditors, close to 100 across the globe, who help us test and ensure that our processes are appropriate and that any areas for improvement are addressed. Now, more broadly, with our portfolio companies, we have over 2,000 businesses at any given point in time that we are managing across all of our strategies. And those businesses are managed through a governance framework which ensures that management of those businesses are capable and tasked and empowered to run their businesses in the best interest of that business. We started before our asset management business was launched as owner-operators of businesses. So our bias to investing is to ensure that decision-making is as close to the business as possible. We don't want people in Canada making decisions about how port operations should work in Sydney. So we are looking at a framework where we provide governance, we provide oversight. In some cases where we have to be stringent, such as anti-bribery and corruption, we ensure that all of our businesses adopt very specific policies, and otherwise we want to make sure that the businesses are able to operate freely and in the best interests of the company. As far as lobbying is concerned, which is what applies to Brookfield, we ensure that those businesses adopt rules and policies similar to ours, but managed at the portfolio company. And management teams of those portfolio companies are accountable to us as normally sitting on their boards to ensure that all of those processes and procedures are in place, just like we are accountable to our board for the same.
Maybe changing tack for a moment. How many shareholders are there in Brookfield? Ballpark.
Thousands,
Thousands, tens of thousands?
tens of thousands.
I'm interested because in our conflict of interest framework federally, we look at instances where there is a broad class of persons affected or an issue that affects a matter of general application. So it's interesting that there's that many. You also mentioned that you have reviewed the Prime Minister's screen in Annex A. My colleagues were asking you about the Global Transition Fund. It is your understanding that the investments from that fund are listed in Annex A?
They are.
As part of the Prime Minister's screen?
They are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Church. Mr. Thériault, 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Brookfield has natural gas treatment facilities, pipelines, and nuclear facilities, oil sands, is present in ports and rail. These are all areas that are targeted by C5. In responding to my colleague earlier, you said that Mr. Carney understood or was aware of Brookfield's future strategies. Were you surprised that one of his first actions was to table C5 that targets those areas that I listed out?
Thank you for the question. Those sectors are critical sectors for the health of the Canadian economy. Am I surprised that the Prime Minister would be seeking to ensure that critical industries of our country are being maintained and indeed enhanced? No. And I haven't read Bill C5 in detail, but in response to your direct question, I would say we read we read legislation and policy the same as everybody else does, but these are critical industries that are very important to the Canadian economy.
Est-ce que
Do you believe that Brookfield should recuse itself so that Mr. Carney is not in a conflict of interest? Should they remove themselves from these projects? Or do you consider that Mr. Carney should recuse himself from all decisions that need to be made when Brookfield would be involved?
What I would say to that is it's, again, very difficult as a private enterprise to make recommendations as to how government should address when conflicts occur among members of government. I would say it would be unfortunate if private enterprise were impacted.
Ce que je comprends de votre réponse,
What I'm understanding from your answer is that you agree that there might be at least an appearance of a conflict of interest or perhaps a true conflict of interest.
Look, it's not for us as a private enterprise to be weighing in on these types of considerations. All I can speak to is how we conduct our business.
vous savez que le projet de loi C5
Bill C5 suspends legislation that had been implemented over the years that allowed us to respect environmental standards that were amongst the highest standards. You should also know that if a project is of general interest, well, it's enough to set all of that legislation aside. That's what C5 does. And so, a business that's going to say to a minister, here's my project, it's of national interest, they can bypass all of the legislation, including C5. That's the legal context that I wanted to share with you regarding that bill. That's what the legislation does. Even if you don't want to opine on our work, do you understand the work that we have to do? And do you understand that objectively, because that was the Prime Minister's first action, do you understand that objectively there is an appearance of a conflict of interest given the fact that the Prime Minister has long-term and deferred options? Do you understand that?
I appreciate the question, and I know you've asked it in several ways. And I appreciate you're passionate about it. And what I will say is I'm here, and I'm here because we do respect the work of this committee. And I'm here to try to help as much as I can as an executive of a private enterprise who has never had any involvement with government.
Okay. Thank you. Merci, Mr. Thériault. Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes, go ahead.
Do you know Mr. Carney?
I do.
And when was the last time you spoke with him, or texted with him, or emailed him, or exchanged letter mail with him?
I'm here to tell you that no one at Brookfield has communicated with the Prime Minister in relation to Brookfield or its business. That's what we're required to monitor. That's what I'm here to confirm.
My question is, when was the last time you communicated with the Prime Minister? And you're required to answer.
I'm happy to answer.
You obfuscated with your first response, sir, so I'm giving you the precision that you're required to answer the question, and it is directly when you last communicated with Mr. Carney.
Since he departed office, I have met with him only once.
And what was the nature of the meeting?
I contacted him to have a discussion about the rise in hate incidents, particularly anti-Semitism, across Canada.
And what was the date of the contact and the date of the meeting?
I contacted him a couple weeks before that, maybe more. The date of the meeting was Friday, October 3rd or 4th.
And did you meet in person or virtually?
I met in person with him. I took the afternoon off, and I came to Ottawa on my own dime.
Okay. And did you meet with him here or in the Prime Minister's office on Wellington?
I believe it's the Prime Minister's office.
Okay. And is that in this building, or is that in, because he's got a couple. So is that in this building here, or is that the one down the street?
On the corner.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. It doesn't hurt to have a Prime Minister financially tied to Brookfield's passive performance. Correct?
Again, I'm not here to opine on what is appropriate or not as it relates to considerations on how political figures, public office holders govern themselves.
So Mr. Carney holds Brookfield linked assets in a so-called blind trust. Many of, and I'll say that, as you confirmed earlier, we know some of those are there because they're less liquid, I think was the term that you used. Is that right? Less liquid?
I would describe those as less liquid,
okay,
yes.
So we know they're still there. And many of the portfolio companies that Brookfield has lobby the government. Now, Mr. Carney's compensation based on those assets held in trust rises when those companies do well. So when they lobby for an outcome that they're seeking, a favorable outcome for their business, and his government grants it, his personal financial position improves.
I think you should say it, though, because there's only one. There's only one company in that list that's in Canada.
Okay. And that company is?
Entropy.
If the Prime Minister sold all of his Brookfield-linked assets, instead of keeping them in trust, there would be no conflict to manage. Is that correct?
I think that that's probably a correct statement, yes.
And so this is what we have isn't a Brookfield problem. The reason that you're here is because the Prime Minister has a financial interest in the performance of this company. And what we've said, what I've said, is that to restore Canadians' flagging confidence in democratic institutions, in their elected officials, that there ought to be a regime in place where party leaders who are represented in the House of Commons divest by way of sale of their controlled assets. And then we avoid the perception and we avoid the risk, and then there isn't a need to manage conflicts. And that's why we're here. We're looking for information because it's very opaque and Canadians don't understand. And they want to be able, it should be possible to hold two views at the same time. You want an investment in nuclear technology, but you also want to be certain that the decision was made because it's best for the country and it's not going to personally benefit any elected official.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Thank you. Monsieur Sarri, pour 5 minutes. On va terminer
You
avec...
have 5 minutes. And we'll end with one final turn, Mr. Cooper, followed by Ms. Lapointe. Thank you very much. I would like to clarify for those listening to us. People have already come to testify at committee and have explained that we are talking about of investments and that Mr. Carney was recusing himself from certain decisions, and we were reassured. But for Brookfield, we will be putting mechanisms in place on our side, but on your side, what is being implemented, knowing that somebody who formerly worked at Brookfield is now Prime Minister? How do you act at Brookfield in order to avoid any conflict of interest?
At Brookfield, we, and I've said this before, we're responsible for ensuring that any interaction with public office holders, whether it's the Prime Minister or any other public office holder, are appropriately administered, that they're appropriately vetted and recorded in our logs, which are tracked by us. And we do the same for any. But in our case, and that's why I can come to this committee and confirm that we've had no interactions with the Prime Minister in relation to Brookfield or any of our businesses. That's what we do. We track any interaction with public officials, and when we are required to, we register.
Quand c'est enregistré, est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui...
When they're registered, is this something that is public or is it for your internal management?
Registration becomes public, yes.
Est-ce que les membres du comité peuvent avoir...
Can the committee members have access to that information?
There's a registry of anyone who has registered in that under that legislation, so that's publicly available.
Encore une fois, si vous le permettez, Monsieur le Président.
Chair, and for those who are listening to us, if we want to summarize, after Mr. Carney left, we have understood that every time there was a decision and it was confirmed by Mr. Blanchard and Mr. Sabia that he recuses himself, and there is a screen that is implemented. And on your end as well, there is transparency regarding interactions, whether it be with the Prime Minister or other office holders. That is important. That said, you are someone with some experience in governance. Are there is there any other advice that you would like to give us? Because I don't want to debate on another company and a prime minister in the future. What we want to implement is a model and processes that are future ready. The context will change in the future, and I don't want to apply something for a single situation like Brookfield and Mr. Carney. I want us to have advice from you. What could we do? What should we add, if there is anything to add?
I appreciate the question. As I've said before, it's not for us as a private enterprise to opine on what is appropriate among government officials in dealing with these conflicts. What I've said is that we, as a private enterprise, respect the rules that apply to private enterprise. And I believe that it should be for government to determine what is appropriate for administering these matters at government. But I understand that what has been implemented has been in place for quite some time. It was suggested to me that this was actually implemented 2 decades ago in similar circumstances. So to your point, yes, these instances in a variety of cases can arise.
J'aimerais bien terminer plutôt avec
I would like to end on a comment, Chair, instead of a question, if you will allow it. I find it unfortunate, and I appreciate your experience and your background and your testimony. That said, you are correct. As a private company, a private enterprise, you don't need to give an opinion. But we've been hearing baseless accusations. But anyway, I would like to thank you, Mr. Beber. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beber, you stated earlier that there are 2,000 Brookfield-owned and operated companies. I would note that only 103 of these companies have been publicly disclosed by Mr. Carney and are subject to his ethics screen. In other words, 95% of Brookfield companies are not the subject of the ethics screen. Will you undertake to provide a list of the 1,900 other Brookfield companies?
I presume that in conversations and the and discussions with the ethics commissioner, that list was produced.
I'm asking you, will you undertake to provide us with a copy of that list? Because when a Brookfield company makes money, Brookfield makes money. You said that. And consistent with that, the success of any of these companies contributes to the value of Mr. Carney's stock options. And so I would submit that it is of material interest. Canadians do deserve the right to know what these other 1,900 companies are, 95% of which are not subject to the ethics screen. So again, will you undertake to provide that list?
Many of those would have no ties to Canada.
So the answer is no. Is that your answer?
I will take it away.
You'll take that under advisement?
Sure.
Okay.
I will.
Now, you stated in answer to my previous round that the 20 companies that are part of the holdings of the Brookfield Transition Fund 1 are listed in Annexure A. The problem with that is that they aren't identified as being part of the holdings of that fund. So we don't know what those companies are by looking at Annex A. And I would submit that that is a problem from the standpoint of transparency, because these companies are disproportionately the most lucrative part of Mr. Carney's future bonus pay. So will you undertake to provide a list that specifically sets out the holdings in that fund so that we can see exactly what they are? Because there is no transparency.
Well, there would be perfect transparency to the Ethics Commissioner, and I think that question should be addressed to the
No, I'm
Ethics
asking,
Commissioner.
I think there's an interest for Canadians
I
to know
understand.
a level of public transparency. You can provide us with a list. You already know what the 20 companies are. So
But I
will you-
think that should first be addressed to the Ethics
Well, I'm
Commissioner.
asking you. So your answer is no?
My answer is you should be speaking to the Ethics Commissioner about it because there is perfect transparency with him.
So I will take that as a no, but you're not prepared to undertake that. Now, I also asked you a question about what are the LPs, and you said unequivocally Brookfield doesn't disclose, doesn't release the names of LPs. And I would submit that is a real problem here. And I'll tell you why. Because Mr. Carney set up the fund. This is a $15 billion fund. We're talking about deep pockets here, formed with investments based on deep relationships that Mr. Carney has. And I think Canadians deserve to know who is invested in Mr. Carney's future bonus pay. I note that a Fitch ratings report shows that 27% of the 21% of those funds are the pool of the funds are banks. 23% are from sovereign wealth funds. So is Mr. Carney beholden to the Qatar Investment Authority? Is he beholden to the Saudis? Is he beholden to the Bank of China? We know he got a $276 million loan from the Bank of China when he was the chair of Brookfield in November of 2024. So I would submit that it is material. It is material, and I would therefore on that basis ask that you provide the names of those LPs.
I've already answered that question.
And so the answer is no.
That's not the answer that I gave.
Well, then I've been provided an answer.
Well, I said that we would take that under advisement.
You'll take that under advisement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Madame Lapointe, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Puis merci encore.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for being with us at committee. We're talking about the Conflict of Interest Act. That is the subject of our study. Can you talk about the ethics and conflict of interest tools that are used in order to prevent conflicts of interest at Brookfield?
Yes, I'd be happy to. As I mentioned, we assess conflicts, and conflict adjudication is premised on three key principles. One is ensuring that the conflict is identified, so we need transparency. Secondly, in the resolution of a conflict, either we're able to reduce the conflict, terminate it, or seek informed, appropriate consent or approvals. We have a strong compliance regime in place that ensures that everyone across Brookfield is attuned to the transparency and is able to identify those conflicts. When they're identified, we have systems in place to then address them. Those systems include ensuring that they are reviewed by a committee of some of the most senior people within Brookfield to ensure that the conflict is being addressed in an appropriate manner. We are subject to very stringent rules relating to conflicts of interest as an SEC registered investment advisor. And so we either have procedures through which the conflict is vetted and determined to be consistent with the procedures and rules we have in place, or we are required to go and seek informed consent of unconflicted decision makers.
La question suivante, c'était de comprendre, mais vous avez élaboré pour que je...
Thank you for explaining that. Have you already participated in the administration of these tools or the systems that you mentioned?
I'm the chair of our conflicts committee, and I'm very much a part of the systematization of our conflicts protocols.
Et selon votre expérience,
And in your experience, the systems that you mentioned, are they efficient in order to reduce the risks of a conflict of interest?
We believe that they are, and we've been undertaking these procedures for decades as we've operated our business.
si je vous parle de règles d'éthique,
If I talk about ethics rules at Brookfield, what are they?
Our ethics, our culture, the rules that we operate by are really fundamentally ingrained in everything that we do. We invest on behalf of institutions and individuals, pensioners, sovereign wealth funds, and we do that with a keen eye on ensuring that we do it with transparency, that we undertake everything we do in compliance with all laws, and that we do it with the best interests, that our sole focus is ensuring that we are operating the business in the best interests of those investors.
on a des blind trusts.
We have blind trusts for the government, but also screens that can be used, as is the case for the Prime Minister. Does this exist in the private sector?
On occasion, screens are used in order to separate people with different types of information. We call them information barriers, and sometimes those are permanent, and sometimes less frequently they are episodic to address very specific circumstances.
Administrer vos information barriers. C'est qui?
Those information barriers, who's responsible for their administration?
Generally, it would be the governance and compliance groups who will articulate very specific procedures that are expected to be implemented in order to ensure that all activity during the period are respected. In the case of permanent, it's even more segregated, and the rules would ensure that any interaction across the wall are supervised and authorized before any wall crossing.
Okay.
Is the terminology we use.
Okay, thank you. Merci, Madame Lapointe. Mr. Beber, I want to thank you for your testimony today. As I mentioned earlier, the clerk has made note of some of the requests that have come from committee members for the production of information. Typically, what I like to do is put a date on it in terms of a response to that. So when the clerk sends you or a representative of Brookfield the information that has been requested, I am going to put a deadline on it for the receipt of that information, just so that you're aware. Okay, so thank you again for your testimony today. I'm going to dismiss you, Mr. Beber, because I do have some committee business to deal with, and it should go very quickly. It's in relation to the, and all members of the committee have received the study budget for the upcoming AI study. I don't expect that there's any problems with that. Can I see nodding of heads that I have committee's approval in the amount of $27,500 for the upcoming study? Okay, so that's been approved, Madam Clerk. I have no other business before us, so I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. I have quite a bit to say on that, I'll just keep you guys here for a minute before we go. Link for question period is in the chat. I've put it in there a few times. There's a link again. So we'll be going over to question period in about 54 minutes. So just a little under an hour. Carney's not going to be in there. He just returned from the G20 summit. So I imagine he's got some jet lag and whatever. So he's in Ottawa. He just got there this morning, but he won't be at question period. Now, on the Brookfield guy, there was a couple things I didn't like where he obfuscated the truth. Like how when Mr. Barrett was asking about the amount of times that Brookfield has either been charged or been convicted or even accused, he obfuscated by saying, "Oh no, we haven't actually been charged." But there's been many cases where Brookfield has either been accused of bribery, corruption, or what was the other one? Money laundering. So there's been at least 3 times where in different jurisdictions in Brazil, in Peru, in Russia, there's been 3 matters within the last 10 or 12 years where they've had issues arise. So I think he could have at least been a little bit more clear about that. I don't like how he didn't answer questions directly on whether or not the well, he kind of did, but what he said was, we don't pay taxes directly out of Brookfield Corp. Brookfield Asset Management will, because it has subsidiaries of companies that they either buy or buy partially, and then they those companies pay the taxes directly through the work that they do. That wasn't really the question. The question was Brookfield Corporation, which owns Brookfield Asset Management. How is that tax being deferred? Because you're obviously pooling it in Bermuda and in the Cayman Islands and things like that. So he kind of, in one way he's right, and in the other way he's kind of leading a little bit. And I would have liked him to be a little bit more precise on exactly how much. He said in general, in 2024, we paid about $750 million. Yeah, but is that across all the subsidiaries, or is that just Brookfield Corp itself? I would have liked a little bit more drilling down on that line of questioning. And at the end of the day, that's kind of just it. He said it many times, and he's right. He's not the only corporation that does that. Tons of other corporations do that. They shell companies and buy subsidiaries. And then even he said himself, which is quite honestly, this happens a lot, and it is kind of smart, where you don't buy the whole entire portion of the company. You buy like 20% of it or 30% of it, and then it's up to the company to buy to file the taxes themselves. But you still are making a profit because you own 20 or 30% of that company. So he has a threshold on whether Brookfield has a threshold on whether they're going to invest or buy the whole company outright. And if they buy the whole company outright, then it's theirs and they can say that they're paying the taxes. But there's times where they only own 20% of the company and they don't know how much tax is paid through that because they're not the ones that actually are responsible for filing taxes. So I would have liked a more precise answer on not just the umbrella, but the shells, the bottom of the stream. But he would have just obfuscated on that. So it is what it is. So we are going to call it here. I'll put the link in chat again. There's question period link. Before we go, let's see. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining the Coffee Support Club. Thank you, Raven, for the super chat. Thank you, My 2 Cents, for joining. And Chris, man, 14 months. Holy crap. It feels like just yesterday I enabled memberships, but wow, 14 months already. Interesting. I'd like to hear more clear answer on that too. Yeah, so would I. But again, it's very, 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 very specific information, so I don't think he might have had that on hand readily, but he could have provided it to the committee at a later date. So anyway, there's the link, and we're going to call it here. So I will see you guys shortly in just a little under an hour. Cheers, guys. See you soon. There's the QP link again. Bye, guys.